Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs 2024 NFL Draft Class based on data, production, athleticism, and other statistical factors will be examined to see how well the Kansas City Chiefs did this year in the draft. Now, I'm a little bit different than everybody else, and I would say stay tuned until the end of the video where I reveal the final grade for the Kansas City Chiefs based on this data that I'm about to present to you. But I'm a little bit different in terms of my draft grades because one of the main things I look at, well, one of two main things I look at is draft pick approximate value. So what this is the expectation from the draft selection they had. So every single pick range, from picks 1 through 5, 6 through 10, so on and so forth, has an average approximate value for the players that are taken there. So that's essentially what's expected. What are you expected to get from a player who's picked 1 through 5 versus who's picked from 221 to 225? There's a big difference there, and that's because, again, most of the time when you pick a player between 1 through 5, those players typically go on to become long-term starters, Pro Bowl, All-Pro type prospects most of the time. Not every time, but most of the time. When you go down the list, you start to get less approximate value. Less value the lower you go down in the draft, and as a result, you have to base your value on that. And a lot of the ways that I grade prospects is I look at one, what the expectation is from where they were selected, and then I look at their data grade because oftentimes their data grade can inform their potential long term. Most of the time, significantly most of the time, when a prospect is drafted late in the draft, say fifth, sixth, seventh round, if they have an above average data grade, they typically will have a higher chance of becoming a long term starter long term versus other prospects. So if you draft players that have below average data grades or very low data grades, only slightly above average data grades in the lesser rounds, you're statistically not going to be hitting on those prospects. So, in other words, they're kind of like wasted picks, if you will. And again, this is probability, it's not certainty. So, there definitely are some things that can affect the data. But the overall data grades I use are based on the prospect's production, athleticism, physical metrics. Whatever correlates the best is typically weighted more in this particular data grade, and it differs from position to position. If you want to learn more about my system of grading prospects, go to my top 50 prospects video on this channel. Check it out. I go into all the details of the correlations, what they mean, the differences at position, and I think it's a really good watch. I think you guys should check that out. Now, one thing that can affect the data is limiting factors. So these are the things that can affect approximate value scores. So essentially, these are things that make the data less reliable. So one of those things is the coaching of a team. If a bad prospect goes to a good team, take for example Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, production-wise, wasn't the most productive player. He was essentially a project coming out, but he went to the right team with the right coaching staff that was able to develop him, coach him up, and then turn him into what he is today in many ways. Now, obviously, he had a lot to do with it as well, but when you have great coaching, you have a great system in place, you can take lesser prospects and eventually get something out of them if they have the raw tools there. Not every team can do that, okay? And that's why there are some limiting factors where you might have a player who doesn't test well data wise, but ends up becoming a really great player because they went to the right team that was able to get the most out of him based on the coaching and development. And by the same token, you could have a really great testing prospect that goes to a bad football team and doesn't really do much long term. And we've seen that countless times with very many different prospects. Injuries can also affect things. The publicity of a media market can inflate players to where they're really not the best players, but because of where they play, they get inflated a little bit. I don't need to get too much into that, but it can affect AV grades, because Pro Bowl is counted as a metric in some of approximate value scoring. Psychological and mental makeup can affect NFL outcomes. And of course, substitution bias, which is the possibility that coaches switch from a higher costing prospect to a lower cost but lower quality. And we've seen this with the Chiefs. The Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill to the Miami Dolphins, and they replaced him with lower cost, lower quality wide receivers. None of the wide receivers that they replaced Tyreek Hill with were of the same quality, Were they able to get it done with them? Absolutely. But I don't think anybody would disagree that the lower cost players that they put in place of Tyreek Hill weren't the same caliber of player, and the results were on the football field. So that's the basics of that, anyway. So now, in terms of the needs for the Chiefs, this is how the Chiefs have tested so far in terms of NFL positional value. So this is how they have done so far. And overall, the Chiefs have a very good football team. But they could improve in different areas here and there. There are some weaknesses here. And based on this chart right here, I was able to determine what the weaknesses were. And one of them was a wide receiver core. The Kansas City Chiefs had the 20th best wide receiver core when you adjusted for the AV of the prospects there and also the age of the prospects at the wide receiver position. So they needed help at wide receiver. They also needed help at tight end. This was mainly affected because Travis Kelce, his age, he's 35 years old. They're gonna have to find a replacement for him eventually. So that definitely is something they should be looking at in the draft. To take a guy, maybe not to take his place, of course, but somebody who could develop long term to become the next Travis Kelce, if that even is possible. Then, of course, you get defensive side of the football where you have cornerback and defensive safety is the biggest needs on the defensive side, but you also could have some help at edge and linebacker for the Chiefs. So these were all the needs that I kind of assessed from a needs assessment perspective. The biggest factors in my final grade are this. These are the three main things that I really care about in terms of grading these prospects. Did they meet their roster needs? That's a big thing in terms of the final grade. Did they draft good prospects? Because if you draft prospects that aren't good or very low data grades, there's a very low possibility of them becoming a long-term starter in the future. And because of that, you could end up having to draft them again in the future. So make sure you get good prospects. And the way I define them is a little bit different from everybody else, but I'm defining them based on who has the better statistical chance for success. Okay, now, did they draft prospects also that have the data potential to outperform their draft status? So this deals with the fact that as we get into the deeper rounds, getting drafting players that have low data grades is not the thing to do. It's not the way, as they say. You need to draft prospects that have great data grades when you get into the lower levels of the draft because it just becomes harder and harder and harder for them to break out when you don't do that. So unless they have some ridiculous athleticism or some ridiculous physical traits in the later rounds, in terms of upside, don't draft players that have low end data grades because you will lose a lot more than if you just take the players that have the above average data grades. I'm not asking you to take, 90 plus percentile data grade prospects. I'm just asking you to take guys that are 70 and above. That's it. Because based on the data work that I've done, 86 to 90% of long-term starting prospects in the NFL typically had 70 or higher data grades. So that is the standard that I base my data stuff on. And with all that's out of the way, let's get to the number one pick, or the first pick, I should say, for the Kansas City Chiefs and pick 28, Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas. His data grade is 97 percentile. His floor is 80. His balance grade is 88.39 with a pick AV of 89.19 out of 100. The overall grade for him would be a A. Taking a look at his offensive market share scores, he has a really good receiving market share, really good total offensive market share, and really good touchdown market share. Those are really good numbers for him in terms of that particular metric. And again, is very, very productive. On top of that, he had great efficiency scores. So in terms of yards per reception, in terms of TD percentage or touchdowns per touch, really great in terms of those numbers as well. He's not a one-trick pony. He gets touchdowns with the football, and I think you are really underestimating him in a lot of ways. His production profile was fantastic. Then, of course, you get to athleticism traits. So this is the one area where there was a little bit of a concern. He had below average explosiveness for his size with near elite speed. So he did run a very, very fast 40-yard dash, not the fastest 40-yard dash at the combine on record, but for his size, Tyreek Hill's speed for his size is much more impressive than Xavier Worthy. Tyreek Hill is a much bigger, denser prospect compared to Worthy, which makes his speed better for his size. So that's the biggest thing. Is Worthy is definitely small. He's a smaller prospect, but he ran really, really fast for his size, and those are just the basics of it, if you will. Is that he's not the most powerful player in terms of lower body strength, but he does have very good speed And I think that's the thing that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be really looking to lock in on this year. Then, of course, you get to adjusted production score. So, adjusted production takes a look at their production for the level of competition, their age, and their strength of schedule. It essentially looks at the okay, he wasn't productive, but where did he play at is what this metric is. And based on this particular metric, Worthy was incredible. He had a 99 percentile pass score, 99 percentile MSA rating, and 97 percentile in terms of age. So he was a prospect at a high-end school at Texas who was very productive, is very young, and did it against very tough competition. So all those factors make Xavier Worthy probably one of the best prospects in this draft class, and the Chiefs got him at 28. So this is a fantastic selection for them. Then of course you get to the next pick of the draft for them, pick 63 with Kingsley, offensive tackle from BYU. His data grade is 97.04. His projected floor grade is 84.37 with a balance grade of 90.70 out of 100. His pick AV is 81.47 with an overall pick grade of an A. When you take a look at his athleticism traits, 86 percentile in terms of explosiveness, with 96 percentile in terms of speed. This is fantastic athleticism for his size at the position, and hits all the All-Pro averages, all Pro Bowl averages, and starter averages at the position. And this is just a fantastic. This is a great pick, really good pick, and I think it adds a lot of depth to their offensive line. Then, of course, you get to pick 131 and Jared Wiley, tight end out of TCU. When you take a look at his grade, he had a 60.12 data grade. Projected floor is 37.87, and balance grade is 48.99. His pick AV is 35.95 out of 100. So most prospects taken at 131 average about 35 percentile in terms of their AV long term. Overall pick grade, I would give this as a D. Jared Wiley just doesn't have that great of a profile for a tight end prospect. When you take a look at his production was pretty much non-existent in terms of his receiving market share, total offensive market share, and touchdown market share, just below average in terms of everything. In terms of his efficiency, he did really well in terms of TD percentage, so that was one positive aspect to him. Athleticism-wise, he did have a really good speed score, 81 percentile, and then 72 percentile in terms of his explosion score, with a flexibility score that wasn't the most impressive down there. And then adjusted production wise, his adjusted production wasn't very well. The only thing I can really tell you about Jared Wiley that might be positive is that he does have great athleticism traits. There's a reason why he had a 60 data score. And with those athleticism traits, he could become something interesting. The tight end position is one of those positions where production isn't the most important thing ever. You could take a tight end who wasn't productive at all and develop them into something very interesting. And I think in Wiley's case, his athleticism traits are interesting enough that I think I might do another video specifically on him and other tight ends to kind of see if there's something there with him. So he might be a little bit of a sleeper, guys. So even though I'm giving this grade a D based on his overall production traits, his athleticism is very intriguing, and the Chiefs have known to be able to develop prospects long term. So I'm excited to see what happens with this pick. And it is a lower level pick, so it's really peanuts. Most prospects taken here don't really become anything long term. So I do think this pick might be something interesting if he develops. And then of course we get to pick 133 in terms of Jaden Hicks, safety out of Washington State. His data grade is 81.35. His projected floor is 49.55 with a balanced grade of in that kind of area right there. His pick AV is 36.68, and overall pick grade would be 40. I would say his overall pick grade would be a B. Taking a look at his production trace, 90 plus percentile in terms of solo tackle data, 77 percentile in terms of interception data, and 58 percentile in terms of pass deflection data. This is pretty good numbers for him overall based on this. When you look at his athleticism traits, he had good athleticism as well, 88 percentile in terms of speed, with good explosiveness and good flexibility for his size or change of direction skills. When you look at his adjusted production traits, he did well here too, guys. And this was a really great pick for them. I think overall, when you look at his overall data, this is a safety that could become a long-term starter for you. And that is a really good selection for them. I think Jaden Hicks is a great player. He did pop a little bit on film, and I'm very excited to see what happens with him. So definitely keep an eye on him as well. This was a great selection, especially for where he was taken. Then, of course, we get to pick 159 and Hunter Norzad, offensive center out of Penn State. His data grade is 87.48. His floor is 58.43 with a balance grade of 72.95. His pick AV is 36, and his overall pick grade would be a B. This is just a great value pick. Even though they already have a center in Humphrey, Hunter Norzad is one of those centers where if something happens, if injury happens, you have a guy that potentially could step in and do really well. And based on his data, on his projected 40-yard dash score, he had an 85 percentile speed score. So I don't know his explosion testing or his flexibility testing. I don't, we'll never really know that, but he did test well in terms of his speed score, his estimated speed score based on NFLDraftScout.com. And this is enough data to project him as a potentially a B prospect in many ways. So I'm very excited with him as well because he does have starter potential. Then, of course, we get to pick 211, Kamal Hayden, cornerback out of Tennessee. His data grade is 40.87. His projected floor is 27.56. Balance grade is 34.51, and pick AV is 23.17. This is the first F grade of the draft. Based on the overall data grade of Kamal Hayden, it's not the best. When you look at his production traits, he had a significantly low solo tackle score, but he did have above average interception and pass deflection data. When you take a look at athleticism traits, he was below average in every single metric. So even though he had really great production, which that might be what the Chiefs were looking at, his athleticism traits weren't the best. And then, of course, when you look at adjusted production traits, he was above average, but his age is a little bit lower. So we'll see long term what happens with him. Again, great ability to make plays on the football in the air in terms of interceptions and pass deflections, but his age and his athleticism traits are things that may not translate long term based on past performances. And then, of course, we get to the last pick of the draft for them, and pick 248, CJ Hansen, offensive tackle out of Holy Cross. His data grade is 80.22 out of 100. His projected floor is 42. His balance grade is 61.11, and his pick AV is 5.79. Overall pick grade for him would be a B. Taking a look at athleticism traits, he had a 92 percentile explosion score of an 86.95 speed score. All these data points put him easily within All Pro, Pro Bowl, and starter potential at the guard position. And this was just a great value pick. I think, again, you're building up depth at the offensive position, the offensive line position, and that's something you need. And especially with the Chiefs making that push to three-peat, this would be a great all-around draft for them. So overall, the biggest thing I would say about this draft class in terms of the final grade, I would give the Chiefs a A. When you look at the fact, did they meet their roster needs? I would say yes. Did they draft good prospects? I would say yes. Did they draft prospects that had the data potential to outperform the draft status? Yes. These are the questions that I think have been answered with this class, and I think overall the Chiefs had a great draft. Every selection they made was good value for them. Even players like Jared Wiley, who, yes, his overall data grade was 60 percentile. He has that athleticism potential where if he gets developed, he could turn into a monster. So I'm very excited about this Chiefs draft in the future to kind of follow them and kind of see what happens. And overall, this was just a great draft class. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. Check out my other work at patreon.com/jcoburn. Check out my formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics, and be sure to purchase the 2024 NFL Draft Analytics Guide available today for purchase. Link is in the description. And with all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.